All right, good morning. It is Tuesday, February 10th, 2026, and that is my cognitive test for the morning. I only know any of that because I'm reading it on the screen, but I know to read it, so that shows that I cognitively know how to look at my screen. I am Kevin Griffin. I think it says that on the screen too. I didn't need to look at that part. And we're going to sit for 20 minutes or so, and then we'll talk a little bit. I'm pretty cleared up. Multiple treatments for my cold. Called a cold. It's just my condition. Hope everybody is well. Um, and yeah, I mean, lots of lots of bad jokes I could make, but I will say that just for fun, um, people often ask me, "Do you still play music at all?" And I usually say not very often. But this past weekend, a friend who I used to work with, who was a singer, came up for the weekend, and we spent the weekend here recording in my office. And so I'm going to turn and let you see the recording studio, such as it is. Let's see. There's guitars, there's a keyboard, there's a recording deck, there's a yeah, drum machine. Anyway, so yes, I do occasionally still do music. And over there is the meditation corner. This and up there is the writing desk. So this is the multi-purpose office. I'm in the Zoom chair. So now you know everything you're going to know about my home. Yes, I said we were going to meditate. Let's get on with that. Uh, Still people coming into the waiting room. There we go. Okay. Everybody can hear me okay? Psst, 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 psst. Jeez, latecomers. Okay. Ooh. So just settling back into a nice meditation posture, whatever is most effective for you, upright or lying down. Can also do standing or walking if you like. And particularly people who might listen to this later on a podcast, you might do it as a walking, taking a walk, listening. We're just trying to be present. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And beginning by turning the attention just toward the sensations of the body, just feeling yourself sitting. Well, starting with the overall feeling of the body. You might feel the contact with the cushion or chair you're sitting on, where are your arms and hands? How is your back aligned? How is your head resting on your shoulders? and having a sense of releasing, of settling, of letting go through the body. And even as we do this kind of arriving practice, it may be that there isn't a feeling of settling, that there's a restlessness or anxiety or some just general discomfort. And certainly we hope that our meditation brings a more pleasant state, but it's not really the idea or the purpose. First and foremost, we want to be aware without resisting or clinging to any aspect of our experience. And that can be difficult when it's not pleasant. Here, we're not striving for perfection, just doing our best to work with what we're experiencing right now. And we use the breath then as our primary focus once we've gained a sense of arrival. Well, feeling the breath just as a movement of in and out, feeling how the body expands, contracts, rises, falls. Feeling the air touching the nostrils, coming in and out. With the breath, we're not trying to block out every other sense impression or any other mental experiences, mental activity. We're just giving the breath a primary focus, bringing it forward. And the mind wanders as it likely will. We gently bring it back, reconnect. We're not trying to breathe in any special way or control the breath. Sometimes the breath will be deep, sometimes shallow, long or short. We just apply our attention, our mindfulness to the experience of breathing, the sensations, the connection that the breath has to the rest of the body, even to our mind states. Start to see that as the mind is able to rest on the breath, the whole body and nervous system responds to that. Things naturally settle. Feeling just the physical sensations, the sensations of breathing. So simple, so essential. Bringing patience to this experience, no matter how often the mind wanders, just gently coming back over and over. Right. Well, morning again. I'm dealing with my new unwieldy screen that um my secondary screen here, you know. Um so when as Tuesday approaches, sometimes I'm like, oh, what am I gonna talk about on Tuesday? And I'm as I often am reading something myself that I like to share, and I do have some things like that. But then, as I talked about before we meditated, I've I've often relied on the venerable institution, the newspaper of record, the New York Times, to provide me with some sort of starting point. And in this particular article today, which is starts being about, it says, drinking is a social lubricant. It's the title. And that's not always a good thing. And apparently, one of our, great government leaders recently made a statement that drinking brings people together. It's not all a bad thing. And then this person went on to say, but actually, you shouldn't drink. So, or it'd be better if you didn't drink at all. So, very, helpful. Like, what? What am I doing? Um, but um, it goes on as typical, like, okay, we're going to talk to some scientists, right? And these. It turned out that years ago, the only research on drinking was done on like people drinking alone, and so they realized, some scientists, like psychologists, realized, oh, people usually drink together. Let's see what happens when we put them. So they bring them into their lab and give them drinks, and I love these kind of studies. I never got to be in one. Here, have a drink for free. And so we're going to watch you, see how you behave. And it turned out like people who drank together, like wound up talking, and strangers wound up becoming friendly, and so okay, so that's a good thing, right? But then it turns out that most people who drink are drinking in a group, and that lots of bad things come out of that. And when people depend upon alcohol to be for their social interaction, turns out, going to the bar every night so you can have social interaction isn't always a good thing. So, we're fortunate we have these scientists to discover these, you know, unimaginable ideas. Um, so I want to get to the stuff that I like. Um, just so much, just okay. So it goes into there's a line in here that I want to share with you. Um, if I can find it, which I probably can't, but it says that it was uh, oh, here it is. People who are drinking talk more, opening up and divulging more personal information, leading to more feelings of social connection. Now, gee, I was thinking, is there any situation in people who aren't drinking open up and divulge personal information? Oh, yeah, I know, AA meetings. I was like, yeah, that's why we have these programs where, we get together and we talk about ourselves and we're open and honest and share and yes, it leads to more feelings of social connection. And I mean, obviously, there's been all this stuff from recent years about how, addiction and alcoholism are like these about lack of connection and isolation, and that connection is the key thing. And so it just, once again, it's one of those things that like we kind of go spinning around in these circles trying to get to this very simple place that of being together and sharing and being open with each other. And it is hard. I mean, very few of us ran to AA to so that we could tell people about how what drunks, horrible drunks we were and all the bad things we did. But those of us who, eventually did have some success in that program or any program, that's usually where we get to, right? Um, and and that divulging personal information thing is kind of my teaching model. It's kind of what I do here. It's not personal and impersonal. Being able to speak and talk and be together. I mean, there's I guess a lot of different things you could say about that. But one of the things I want to say about it, because this group is focused on Dharma and recovery, Buddhism, and meditation in particular, is that meditation alone clearly is not going to provide that social contact. And it's why I've never suggested that that you could just meditate to become sober. And I know there are people who hope they can do that, who don't want to have to be with people, and so that all comes back to like, oh, like when you're not drinking, you have trouble with social situations. I mean, I, I'm not at all comfortable going to parties and where people are drinking, and it's not because they're drinking, but you know, I'm not a very comfortable social person. I feel safe in certain contexts, and particularly in this kind of context, and so it's understandable why at least people like me would be like, oh, I'll just meditate a lot, and then I won't drink. Then I won't want to drink anymore. It'll quell that problem, whatever. It'll heal me some way, and it's helpful, but it doesn't work as a cure. Um, so it's a piece. It's helpful, as I say, it's supportive, but this need for being together. It's another one of those things. Very obvious. We know that humans have this need, and anyway, I just thought that was once again one of those sort of interesting things that where there's you know um, where it takes a bunch of like scientists to sort of arrive at these fairly I don't know how obvious, but kind of not not revelations, and so that's one thing. I have some other things this morning to read. This one is from Ajahn Amaro's book with the, you know, lofty title of The Phenomenological Approach of the Buddha. Just some light reading. After you look up phenomenological, you can, but it is a very, deep Dharma book. And I'm sure it's for free. It's one of those ones you can find somewhere, the phenomenological approach of the Buddha. But right in the middle of it, with all these sort of things on emptiness and nibbana and all these things, he does a thing on the precepts, and it's called ring fencing the reptiles. So I'll read some of this. I guess I'll read the whole thing. It's a couple of short pages. Um, and he's referring back to what he'd just been writing about. Along with teaching this sort of mental approach, recognizing and feeling compassion with the arising of emotions, the Buddha established the precepts as part of the training. Sila, ethics or morality, with respect to our behavior, is very supportive of the mental side of practice. In its simplest form, there are the five precepts refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and using intoxicants. When we have an impulse that says, that's something really great, I want to take it for myself, Sila reminds us, no, that doesn't belong to you. You can't just go ahead and grab it. When we've become annoyed that someone just sat down in our chair or cut us off at an intersection, we restrain our aggressive and violent impulses because there is a precept against killing. It might sound like I'm joking, but even on meditation retreats, people can get homicidal feelings towards someone who moves their cushion. When we understand that, quote, the world, unquote, is in our mind, there is a change of attitude. The Buddha established the precepts as another way of helping us gain that perspective. It's one thing to understand the concept of not reacting blindly to impulses of greed or aversion, fear or jealousy, but it's another thing to actually refrain from acting on those impulses. In the film Jurassic Park, a huge electric fence keeps all the dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures inside the boundaries of the park. The trouble starts when one of the creatures knocks a hole in the fence and they break out. The precepts are like that fence. Taking the precepts is what I call ring fencing the reptile brain. The reptile brain says, I like, I take. I don't like, I kill. It's the part of the brain responsible for all of the chthonic urges, the basic instinctual impulses that are part of our evolutionary inheritance, such as violence, greed, sexual desire, territory. Our reptile brain is part of nature and therefore part of our nature as animals. So the precepts serve as a fence that holds the reptiles back. When we don't keep the precepts, then the fence is breached and the reptiles get out, wreaking all kinds of havoc, like the velociraptors wandering through the kitchen, causing all kinds of chaos. The fifth precept, refraining from using alcohol and intoxicating drugs, is particularly important because becoming intoxicated easily knocks holes in the fence and lets the reptiles out. Hello. Part of recognizing the importance of the role of attitude in the mind is a deep respect for the precepts. They highlight the areas of greatest vulnerability and at the same time align us with what can be called the better angels of our nature, also known in classical philosophy as synderesis, the love of the good. In Pali, this heartfelt virtuousness is called guna dhamma. Okay, study your Greek, study your Pali, you'll keep up your Latin. The precepts support a change of attitude by giving us a little extra breathing space to recognize impulses like jealousy, rage, fear, craving, etc. Respecting the precepts and living by their principles equates with keeping the fence in good repair so that the velociraptors and tyrannosauruses don't escape. The precepts keep the walls strong and assist us in living harmoniously and respectfully with each other. We're not trying to suppress or destroy the unskillful, say this differently. We're not trying to suppress or destroy the unskillful forces of the heart, but merely to contain them so as not to harm ourselves or others. Then the more those urges are understood, the more the mind can evolve to a state where they lose the ability to dominate our actions. Of course, sometimes, even with the best of intentions, the walls are breached and the reptiles get out. Or maybe there are a lot of gaps in our neighbor's fence. We can't expect everyone to behave like arahants, enlightened beings, after all. So there might be times when our family members or friends' behaviors are causing harm to themselves or others. It can be tricky in this kind of situation to know what to do. A therapist once commented to me that even though they were not allowed within the bounds of their profession to instruct their patient in how to behave, they found that their own practice of sila helped them. They were able to receive the patient's life in a more awakened way and teach them to observe their mind. That in itself made a big difference. In a roundabout way, sila was having an influence. The therapist was not instructing people to practice sila because they'd lose not only the interest of their patient, but also their license to practice. But they were able to use the Buddha's teaching on the precepts to benefit both themselves and the people they're responsible for. This principle is called abhaya dana, the giving of fearlessness. And it is also why the Buddha referred to the five precepts as the five great gifts, or Mahadana. By keeping the precepts yourself, you grant, quote, to an immeasurable number of beings freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. In turn, the noble disciple enjoys immeasurable freedom from fear, enmity, and affliction. And that's from Anguttara Nikaya 8.39. This underscores the point that the attitude of the mind and how we function on the human level can convey itself in beneficial ways, both verbal and nonverbal. The standards we keep for ourselves have an effect to a greater or lesser extent on the people we interact with. Over the years, I've spent a lot of time with people recovering from alcohol and drug addiction. I'm one of those people. When somebody is trying to get off the addiction to alcohol, being with someone who is sober and who doesn't need to drink conveys something exceptionally helpful to them. I say this as someone who drank a lot between the ages of 15 and 21. It shows that you can live as a free, independent person away from those habits. Being face to face with a living example has a profound effect. It is deeply encouraging. So there's a lot in this little piece. The image I think is a apt one. The fences, the boundaries. Uh, the 12-step model is sort of that God is protecting you. I guess God is your fence or whatever. And if you don't sort of have that belief system, then there's we need something else. And I often talk about and think about how, for me, there is this red line. I don't call it offense, but it's the same thing, that there's some things I just don't do, right? And that taking that step to, and where it becomes not just what I don't do, but that it's not even in the realm of possibility. I don't allow it to seem like it's in the realm of possibility that I could drink. So there's the ways that I'm sure everybody here has their own way of kind of conceptualizing this and protecting themselves. That's just one thing to say about this reading, that the fence that he's describing, the ring fencing, calls it, right? The ring fencing, the reptiles. Also worth noting that he too references community, right? Particularly at the end, you know, um, being with someone who is sober, doesn't need to drink, conveys something exceptionally helpful. Um, I will note, going back to this New York Times article, that at the end of the article, and it said something like about 50% of people don't drink at all in our country, or some number, and basically like they're okay. They have social lives, They, they they don't depend on alcohol for their social life, and that's another good reminder, because certainly I know when I drank, I just thought people who didn't drink were weird, and there was something sort of wrong with them, that they were a kind of corny people, like Mormons or something. They had, and if there are any Mormons here, forgive me for using that as some kind of a, I don't know what, I guess derogatory. I just mean that they, you know, I thought I was cool and that they were uncool. This is what I'm getting. And and I didn't think there were many people who did that. I thought they were this sort of odd little, they weren't a cult, but they were equivalent to a cult, of like this odd little pocket of humans. And and of course, when you get sober, maybe you go to a party and like other people aren't drinking, and they're not sober, they're not alcoholics. You're like, why aren't they drinking? They're like, oh, I don't like to drink, or something like that. You're like, what? What do you mean? So again, it's just our our belief system, what, how we see the world, what we believe the world is, what we believe is true about the world. Um, so the precepts, and I love hearing him, say that the fifth precept is particularly important. Because it's what's quite interesting, and when I was writing One Breath at a Time, I met with Ajahn Amaro, and he read the first draft and gave me some notes on the book. That's some over 20 years ago. But one of the things he told me at that time about the precepts, which I've since come to learn more about, is that the first four precepts, to not kill, not to steal, not to harm sexually, and to not lie, are considered moral absolutes, essentially. They, there is a karmic consequence from doing any of those things automatically. That using intoxicants is not a moral absolute. That you could use an intoxicant and it wouldn't necessarily cause harm. So that I hope that makes sense. But the point, and that he's making here, and as he said at that time, was the problem with intoxicants is that one tends to break the other precepts when one is using intoxicants, and so they take down the fence. And so ironically, although the fifth precept isn't considered a moral imperative, it's it winds up having this more broader impact. But most of the like probably most of the people who are in jail committed their crimes when they were intoxicated. Um, when any of us think about the harm we did in our lives, a lot of it was when we were intoxicated. Certainly for me, violence. Um, I don't want to go into a lot of the details, but that was something that I became violent at times when I was intoxicated, and other things that I wouldn't have done. Um, so yeah, that fifth precept is precious, and even if you take it back from like the doing harm, when people try to argue for that, oh, it's okay to have a glass of wine with dinner, and I'm not, obviously I don't particularly care to argue about that. But if you're trying to discuss why would there be some reason not to do that if you didn't have a problem with alcohol, it's that
The
if
five precepts.
if your commitment is to um, if your commitment is to being mindful and present in your life, then we know that any amount of intoxicant limits that. I mean, lots of things limit it. Looking at your phone limits it. You know, but clearly intoxicants. So I guess that's probably enough. I want to just mention two things that tonight, for people in the Bay Area, I will be teaching in person at the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. This is my monthly second Tuesday class at 7:30, 2304 McKinley Avenue in Berkeley. Uh, all are welcome. It is free. Um, and then this Friday night, I'll have the Spirit Rock Zoom class at 10, or I'm sorry, 6 p.m. on Friday. Also, I guess a third thing, in March, I'm going to be doing 4 Monday classes with Vimalasara, who's another teacher that I teach with. We're kind of sharing the seat for a series of classes for the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies. I just put that up on my website. And those are actually, they're coordinated like an East Coast time. They wanted us to start at 6 o'clock on the East Coast. So it'll be 3 o'clock here on Mondays. The first 4 Mondays of March. There are 5 Mondays this coming March. So that's the upcoming. Well, there's also a retreat in April because the retreat that's happening in 2 weeks is, I think it's full. There are probably some dorm rooms, but I'm also teaching a retreat. Let me see if I have a link to it somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Um, Co-teaching with Paula Snow in April in Northern California, and it's this kind of interesting place called the Shelterwood Collective, which is it's a place that has there's a lot of like camping and stuff there, tents, and so it's a little bit more affordable than some of my retreats. Trying to find the proper link, but it's it's like a strange thing. Here we go. Sorry. Um, anyway, all this stuff is on my website, so if you're interested in coming on a retreat or just coming to one of these classes, um, yeah, okay, I finally found the link. Here's the link if in case Monica didn't find it. So uh, come out, sit a retreat, and let me open it up for any questions or comments. A lot of readings today. Bill, hi.
Hi, Kevin. Um, it's really funny when you started to mention that article in the New York Times. I had my phone right there, so I looked it up really quick. And it's interesting that that knucklehead, excuse me,
Yeah,
Dr. Oz is the guy that puts the words out, you know. I mean, he was a quack from way back, and as far as I'm concerned, he calls himself a heart surgeon. Maybe he did that for a while, but I mean, you just take everything with a grain of salt with that guy. And so I just go. It's just hard. It was hard for me. Once I saw that, I go, you got to be kidding me.
I know.
Yeah.
Believe me.
Thanks for
Yes.
pointing that out. That was kind of an interesting kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
my mind went to the same place when you were talking about the precepts with, the fifth precept kind of is the springboard to all the other crap that's in front of it. So it's really an amazing kind of a concept. And I thought about that years ago, going, when I first started to pay attention to the precepts and go, this is why they do this on the beginning of a retreat. It's the first thing they tell you is, they go over the precepts, so
Yeah.
pretty interesting. So anyway, it was just my 2 cents. As soon as one of the first things you read in that article is got Dr. Roz's name on there, I'm going, okay, I can
I
throw
know.
this one right out. So
That's why I didn't mention mention his name because
sorry
it's a
about that.
distract. Well, and it's true. I mean, it's really a tragic time that when we can't when we lost all faith in the people that are supposed to be, guiding our
Yeah,
country.
taking care of us, right? Yeah.
But it's kind of like we all know enough nowadays, and you pretty much know that if they say something that's a lie, it's kind of like, okay, then it's probably the opposite is true, whatever they said.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. If somebody doesn't raise their hand, I'm going to start talking about golf. So pretty because Bill is a golfer and we've played together, right? Start talking about my new 7 wood. It's changed my life. Okay. Thank you. Somebody, anybody. I can, well, I will mention that, just say that the next thing I was going to talk about and that I didn't get to today is craving. And, I was looking at Judson Brewer's book, The Craving Mind, if you're interested in sort of the process. But and this is what I'm going to talk about on Friday night for Spirit Rock is craving because I'm kind of I'm doing kind of like the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path this year for Spirit Rock. But the from Judson Brewery's a research scientist, also a mindfulness and Buddhist practitioner, and talking about the triggers and the reward system that that creates addiction, and um, the I've been reading lately more about how the Buddha talks about that happening, and it's so interesting. Sometimes the things the Buddha says are so simple that you can sort of they seem obvious, too obvious to really have a lot of meaning, but the the what's called the six sense bases are one of these lists that the Buddha uses to describe how craving happens, which is that it starts with the fact that we have senses. If we don't have senses, we can't, we don't develop craving. And the senses include the mind, the mental sense. And so then the senses have contact with sense objects. The eyes see visual objects, the ears hear sounds, smells, tastes, and the mind encounters thoughts or mental experiences. And so there's this process. And at that point of contact, what happens, and you've heard me talk about this quite a bit, what happens is that we experience it as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And if it's pleasant, then we tend to crave it. So this is how craving happens in Buddhism, that there's this sense experience that gives contact and there's a pleasant feeling, and then we try to get keep getting the pleasant feeling. It's the same thing that scientists point to. And so the Buddha talks about this and he says, well, the way to interrupt this is to do what he calls guarding the senses. And it turns out that guarding the senses is a lot like putting the ring fence around the reptiles, around the velociraptors. Velociraptor? Anyway, yeah, not a not an official Jurassic Park person. Um, so it's a very tricky concept because when you hear the idea of guarding the senses, it can sound like, oh, I'm not supposed to look at that. I'm not supposed to listen to that. But rather, we're actually trying to interrupt the craving from arising. We see the experience, we hear the sound, we taste the food, we experience it. But in that moment, we recognize that what's happening is just pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then we don't take the next step. And what that requires, of course, well, I'll say it, there's two things I can think of right off that it requires. First, it requires a lot of mindfulness to be at that stage of experience to like, oh, here I go. No, I'm not going to go there. It also requires this commitment, like a reason. Why should I do that? And that's one of the things that we have to learn in recovery is why should I not drink, right? We have to have a reason to not drink. There's this, you know, I don't know how many of you went through this. Imagine many of you, this push and pull, this battle between, well, I want to drink, but I shouldn't drink. Yeah, but why shouldn't I drink? Well, because sometimes bad things happen. Yeah, but it doesn't always, not always bad, so, and it's a social lubricant, and, and it helps me relax and it helps me go to sleep or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but then what about that time when you crash the car? What about the time when you got, I won't even list all the things that happen. And so that coming to that realization, like, no, 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 I must be committed. I have to do this. That needs to be there for you to care enough to interrupt well, it's a pleasant feeling. Why shouldn't I pursue it, right? So those to me are the two keys is like mindfulness, but then the commitment, the recognition. And so the Buddha talks about this in another term he calls gratification, danger, and escape. He says the gratification is there, that it's pleasant, but the danger is what it leads to, that it leads to suffering ultimately. And that because and behind that there's this the impermanence of the experience that you can't hold on to it. So the escape, of course, is to let go. Um, so it's interesting to see to like look at the science and then look at how the Dharma talks about it and see how it connects and um, you know. So oh, now there's some hands up. Sure, okay. I looked away. Steve, go ahead.
Well, it prompted me when you were describing all that. It brought up a thing that happens to me often, especially on weekends when I'll be out walking my dogs at 7 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden people are cooking bacon and eggs, and the smell wafts all over the neighborhood,
Yeah,
so like instantaneously I just get this craving, and being an acute food addict, if I respond to that and come
yeah,
home,
yeah,
it just creates tremendous suffering because it creates a very unpleasant situation.
yeah,
So, just what you described is exactly what I go through with
yeah,
just that scent smell. So, thank
yeah,
you. I just enjoyed listening to that whole thing. It
yeah,
was
yeah. Oh, did we lose you there? No. Oh, you just muted yourself. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's very much. I mean, that's exactly what you have to uh, interrupt right then. Unfortunately, the bacon and eggs aren't right in front of you in that moment, so you would at least have time to, as you're walking home and wait, how can I need to get to the store and get some bacon. It's like, oh, wait, what am I doing here? So it gives you a little space there. It's pleasant. The smell is pleasant. It doesn't have to lead to craving. Okay, Liz. Hi.
Hi, thanks. Um,
Yeah,
I'm new to recovery, 6 months.
welcome.
Thank you. I have a tendency to get pretty obsessed with things, so I have to be careful. Um, and so I've been replacing some of my addictive behavior with other behaviors, and
Uh-huh.
they're very much related to the senses. So I might get a craving and I'll go play Bach on the piano. And I don't see any harm in that. It's
Right.
satisfying my senses. It's satisfying my need to problem solving. I'm getting a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Um, but there's always this conversation between that fine line of, is this escape? Is this another form of just gratification that, is leading to escape? And it's just a really complicated thing when it comes down to the senses and those emotions, those needs. So, yeah.
Um, Bach is wholesome, definitely. And it's really important in recovery to find things that we enjoy. Recovery isn't about becoming miserable or having no pleasure in your life. It's, yeah, finding wholesome activities that give you a dopamine hit, that bring you joy, that help you feel connected. And yeah, you don't have to become, you know, uh, obsessed with. It's as we say, progress, not perfection. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with activities like that. If you find that you're playing the piano so much that your fingers are starting to bleed, then then you've crossed a line. But that, and people do that sometimes with wholesome activities like exercise, for instance. Sometimes people injure themselves or overdo that. But generally, yeah, it's great when you can discover like, oh, there's all these ways to be happy that don't involve harming myself or harming others, that don't involve intoxication or overindulgence, uh, overeating, whatever it is. And that's part of the process of recovery is discovering what brings you happiness. Because we didn't, one of the things that I think happens with addiction and alcoholism is that as as we become adults, and typically that's when we sort of, that starts to take over, we abandon a lot of the joyful activities that we had when we were young because we've just got this immediate fix. I mean, literally, that's kind of my thing with golf. That's why I took up golf. I was already 25 years sober, but it was very much like, oh, this was something I loved to do when I was a kid, you know? And yeah, I know there's all these negative associations with it, and I'm sorry, but I enjoy it, and it when I'm there, I'm just there. It's one of the few things that I do that completely absorb me, and I'm sure you feel the same playing the piano. I certainly felt that way this weekend recording. I My friend had a song, and he wanted me to, and I was creating all the music parts. And at times he just left because he's a singer. He just left the room. I don't know what he was doing. I was just in there for like hours, recording guitar, bass, the drum machine, mixing things. Oh, well, let's redo that, and the time just passed. And afterward, I was like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. But I was completely absorbed in it. It was joyful and it's great. You're so lucky to have something like that you can do. Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope you keep showing up and keep taking care of yourself and stay on this path. It's a great one. Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
those
Kevin.
who hung out and hope to see people tonight or later in the week and or next Tuesday. So be well. And if I don't see you before the weekend, happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, just a reminder to all
Get out and get
those
a card.
who have responsibilities. Yes,
Thank
blessings.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Okay, Jerry, taking it off for playing for hours by yourself. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.